Welcome to the Eclectic Collection. Today is episode 97, Other Options. What do I mean by that? School, of course. That's all I think about. 24/7, 365. Why? Because I'm a teacher. Why? Because I really didn't want to grow up. And I've confirmed that with many a friend and family. So yes, that is the fastest way to being stuck in time like The Simpsons. Just become a teacher. You might look worse, but you actually never age. That's a pro tip. Okay, so what's the deal? Kids always say to me, well, when I go to college, when I grow up and go to college, someday I'll go to college, when I take the SATs to go to college. I am all for it. I obviously never left school since I was 5. Totally have many degrees. Totally love the idea of learning. Am a complete nerd. Love it. Embrace it. I'm all for it. And that's that. So learn, baby, learn. Here's the thing. Learning isn't so traditional anymore. And if you are an untraditional kid, adult, person, whomever, alien, feel free if you're listening to this on another frequency from another planet, I do think that you could embrace learning different ways now that weren't available before. So having been the Catholic school kid, you grow up reading, writing, arithmetic, get in a uniform, do your thing, 7.5 hours a day, go home, do your homework, rinse, repeat. Languages are generally memorization. You kind of can't get out of that. But now there's a lot of cool things that didn't exist, like Duolingo and Babbel, etc. You could, do a lot with those apps and things. They didn't have a smartphone, so you had to look in a book, and you had to go to a library, big place that held books. Now, with the internet, and then beyond the internet, just all the different possibilities of apps and courses and master classes and different hands-on experiences, you have to kind of figure out what kind of learner you are. Are you a visual learner and you like to see things, like my sister, who is constantly asking for a visual, and I'm totally auditory, which is probably why I'm in the language. I'm like, just tell me how to get there. Don't show me a map. Maps are useless. Or you're a kinesthetic person. You like to physically build things and you need that tactile part of it. Or are you a combination learner where you have all three or two of the three, or, and maybe you like to see charts and graphs and maps and physically put something together. So everybody's different. Your first task is really to figure out what kind of learner you are. But there are other options to learning, and just because you opt to not necessarily go to college doesn't mean that you are not learning. You're just learning different things in a different setting. I tell people, I've had kids say to me, well, I don't really want to go to college. Well, that there's nothing wrong with that. There was this whole trend, and I don't know how it happened. I really don't. Because I'm vintage 74, so having really grown up in the late 70s and the 80s, I was part of that, you just go to college. Because in the 70s, it was kind of a big deal. It was, 60s and 70s, you went to college for a specific reason, to get a specific degree. Not everyone did. And that's not to say it was frowned upon. It just wasn't as common. And, people who did that were doing so for a specific degree, to means to an end. Doctor, and engineer, whatever you wanted to be, teacher, etc. Then, there was still a big workforce, I'll say, still a big blue-collar presence in the 70s. In the 80s, it was starting to be suggested that you went to college. And that would almost ensure, with unequivocation, that if you went to college, you absolutely had a job with no questions asked afterwards, and you were going to make more money than anybody who didn't. And that was true in the 80s and kind of bled into the early 90s. And by the early 90s, it was you're definitely going to college. So now it wasn't a good suggestion. Now it was, you're going to college. So in the 90s, you absolutely were going to college in order to get said job and make said money. Okay. Then something happened. The millennium happened. And 2000 hits. And unfortunately, in 2001, our country experiences a very gigantic, horrible setback with security and issues with 9/11. And it really put a massive kink in that ideology. Because for the first time, really, in my lifetime, we were Cold War kids. So Gen Xers didn't really see any kind of real action. Yeah, okay, there was the Beirut conflict, and yeah, we had that little whatever was going on with Gaddafi in 85, but it was kind of a joke. It wasn't anything comparatively speaking to the magnitude of Pearl Harbor in the 40s, or the Korean War in the 50s, or the Vietnam War. The people that were coming back, that's like right when Gen X was just born, so they weren't part of that. So we had like Desert Storm. Okay, not to knock what those people were doing, but it was a way different kind of conflict, and it was also a lot more technologically advanced. So you could laze a target, thus essentially fighting a war from a distance. Drones became a thing. Pilots could literally air raid from the sky. Like, it was not as hand-to-hand combat as you had in World War I and II. So the military changed, the optics changed, the whole idea of flight and of course, warships, subs, etc. All of that changed. And as tech got better, and radar, sonar, fill in the blanks. I'm thinking of Transformers right now, where they have like the rail guns, probably in the fictional section still, but we're probably not far from it. There was just a big shift in military, so that also created a bit of a surge in military participation, especially 9/11. So now it wasn't like I have to go to college. A lot of people were thinking, I'm going to enlist. Admirable. I'm not that good of a person, not going to lie, but thank you for your service, those of you listening. And it really comes down to, that is an option, always been an option. Some people, wanted that regimented, schedule, organized, be all you can be kind of thing, be taught what to do, learn a skill, travel the world, literally see different countries by way of whatever branch that they were in. And that's not a problem at all. It was just not as talked about until usually something happens, and then you start to see it. It's kind of like you don't really notice the thing until you have a reason to sort of notice it. I can remember going to see The Hunt for Red October in like 1990, and all these guys were like signing up, like, I want to go in the Navy. After Top Gun, they actually had so many recruiters sitting outside. Everybody's like, I want to be a pilot. Like, it was this massive surge in military. So not to say that that's the reason to sign up, but sometimes when an event happens, or you just have a really good movie that's positive representation of the military, people get influenced and want to help. The other part, of course, is all the trades. All the different your plumbers, your electricians, your and the people, your chefs, your caretakers, your hairdressers, people that are in service and do all of the jobs that make this country run. And that's a huge amount of people. But a lot of times there's just been this focus, like, go to school. So I saw kind of a breaking point in the early 2000s. And I'm here to say that if you are not interested in, I'll say, traditional school, and even school's kind of on its ear because of all that's gone on in the last couple of years with the pandemic and whatnot, but just being able to Zoom a class, being able to take classes at night, these were unheard of things. You had to show up, get to school, and that was it. And you were just physically there, and you participated, and you did physical work on paper, and you turned it in, and you got feedback, and that was it. Well, we're not in that stuck way anymore. So there are so many options, and maybe school is for you now. If you want to do a non-traditional show up and go to a class, you could have an online class, you could have a Zoom class, you could have a distance class, or hands-on class. There's so many more experiential learning situations. Or maybe it's still not for you, and you want to learn a skill or a trade. And boy, do we need those people. And I can tell you that it's just as lucrative a living and just as needed and important and critical as any, doctor, teacher, lawyer that there is out there. To be a professional doesn't mean that you're necessarily in those jobs. You still have a profession. People say, you have a trade. Yeah, okay, fine, but you're no less important. And again, then there's the military component, which kind of combines the two, because very often with the GI Bills, you will go into whatever branch, learn your combat techniques and what you're doing with whatever branch you're doing, but also not just being told your role in potentially flying or sailing or whatever it is that you're going to do in whatever branch you're going into, but also they assess you for whatever skill and fitness level you have, so that you could be, anywhere from Navy SEAL all the way in other end of the spectrum, maybe like a cryptographer or somebody that's in IT, or that they're working in the engineering department or whatever. So, and then you could go to school, if you will. So you learn that skill and trade while you're within the military, and then very potentially be a weekend warrior and get a traditional degree after, if you so choose. So there's a lot of options out there. Just please don't think that if you don't want to do what everybody else is doing, because I don't think everybody else is doing all one thing anymore. It kind of used to be that way, and not so much these days. For God's sake, you could go get your doctorate and still have no promise of a job. Work absolutely not in the degree within the wheelhouse that you studied. And I've got friends that went to school with me that studied English and are running a GameStop. Okay, it has nothing to do with that. And on the flip side, yes, I utilize my degrees because I was in that academic world and still am. But my other business, I learned business by going. I didn't go to school for business. I was way too busy in the arts and languages and English and whatnot and psych to even think twice about that. I didn't have the room in my schedule, and boy, did I cram every possible class I could for those 4 years. But and I still went on and got my master's, and I'm still working towards my doctorate and my second master's. So I just never stopped going to school. But as much of an academic as I am, there were practical things I learned by doing within the realm of my business, because it was something fun that I wanted to do, and it was a side skill. I had always been into videography and photography and sound and lighting, and I just did it. I just learned by doing, and that's experiential. So there's no right or wrong way. There's no good or bad thing. If you develop skills because you did the thing, learned the thing, studied the thing, or taught the thing, you win, and you have whatever it is that you want to do. And just make sure that you're doing what you really like to do. There are so many options out there now that weren't even out there before. And if you are a parent, don't feel that your kid is less than, or make them feel less than if they don't want to do a traditional course of school, or if they don't want to go into family business, or I've seen it on both sides. I've seen it where families own a restaurant, or the 5 generations were electricians, or 5 generations were lawyers. It doesn't mean that next kid has to be that person. You might not want to do that. They might want to go do another thing. Look at Ryan Reynolds in The Proposal. So there's a lot of good and bad to choosing your own path and liking what you're doing, and however you get there, you get there. There's just no way to force somebody into that. It's just never going to have a good outcome. I feel like ultimatum from a family member is usually never a good sign. So see what that person wants to do, or if you're friends with them, or if it's your kid, or if you're talking to your parents, and have a conversation and be honest and open about what it is, and explore your options, and maybe go do an online class or something that doesn't cost money, or look up some stuff on the internet or YouTube, or maybe take a small course that's minuscule in cost, and see if you like it. Once you get into it, you might not. So explore early and young and often. But it doesn't have to be that, well, this was, so therefore it will be. Sometimes it works like that, but not always. So you're the captain of your fate and the master of your destiny, says Henry David Thoreau. So make sure that you enjoy what you're doing, and you got to come upon that on your own means. I say that as I have been in the game for a very long time. So 25 years later in education, I've seen it every which way. And most people kind of come to their own terms in their own time, but not always. So help, don't hurt, and don't be a hindrance. Try and encourage and see. Education is key. So if you go find out some more about what you might want to do, that's only going to serve better to figure out the path that you really want. If you like what you heard today, then check us out at eclecticcollectionpodcast.com, or follow us on your preferred platform. I'm Terry Tenaglia. Thanks for listening.